When you talk about the gospel, you're most likely talking about the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John found in the Bible. But if you look at the word gospel, it's a modernized version of the medieval term Godspell or godly news, which in turn comes from a Greek word that Jesus used when he was giving his final instructions to his apostles before he departed earth for heaven. He said, "Proclaim this euangelion, or good news, to all of creation." When Jesus said, "Go preach the gospel," he wasn't telling them to preach what Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John wrote. Those books didn't exist at the time. What he was saying was, tell them the good news of what I did for them, and what I did for you. And that good news is this: we were separated from God. We were caught up in our lives, born unfairly into a world of darkness, into a state of separation from God. And we didn't have any way to change that. Our good deeds and our charity will never be enough to change that. But Jesus himself, the Son of God, God made flesh, made a way for us to reunite with God and free us from the curse that we were born into. Now, if we would but believe in this, then we would live in his wonderful presence forever. St. Paul wrote, "I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God that brings salvation." Again, he wasn't talking about what someone else wrote, but what God himself did. Not in someone else's life, but in his own. He preached his gospel. So my question to you is this: what is your gospel?
I grew up in church, and so it was more of a religious activity rather than a real relationship with Christ. And so as a result with that, I had feelings of insecurity, and I was always looking to other people for validation.
My life before Christ it involved a lot of emptiness and just searching to be fulfilled, whether that be in people or in places or school or family, just wherever I could fill the emptiness. It was just a lot of searching and not finding.
As I grew older, everything I had learned growing up, it was like it finally clicked, and I was able to actually have a real relationship with Christ and actually submitting myself, my will for his.
Inviting Christ into my life made me feel like I did not have to search for anything anymore, and the emptiness had completely been filled.
In Christ, I find my worth, and I no longer have to feel shame and look to others for my validation. I'm able to see myself as he sees me.
Now that I have Christ, I feel like I can boldly lead my family, knowing that Christ is the center and the foundation of all the decisions that I make.
Now that I'm in Christ, I feel like God is leading me to help other women and show them that they don't have to live in shame and guilt, and God rebuilds and restores in our weaknesses.
Now that I'm in Christ, I feel that God is continually opening my eyes to know that the visions that I see are smaller than what he has for me. So going forward, and everything that he leads me to go forward with, I need to keep my vision open, just to allow him to be able to multiply whatever good is going to come out of what I'm doing. He's going to multiply it into being bigger and to being something that is far bigger than what I can see.
Before Christ, I struggled with my identity a lot. Allowed words, actions to really affect how I feel on the inside, kind of living outwardly inward in a way where everything on the outside affected how I felt on the inside. Through a lot of my life, I struggled to kind of define who I am because I was searching for validation in others. And throughout my life, it was pretty tiring, pretty draining. My experience inviting Christ into my life it was weird and surreal all at the same time because it was something I never truly felt before in my life, because once again, I always search for something tangible. So to look for something intangible was a little strange at first, but in a weird way, like I felt this rest, I felt this peace that I have never really experienced in my life before. Now that I have Christ in my life, it's ridiculous because originally I was living outwardly inward, or now I'm living inwardly outward, where God's peace, God's rest that resides in me now allows me to feel a certain way about myself. And that's how I go through my day-to-day activities, dealing with the situations on the outside now. I no longer look for that validation in others because I know through God, He says He knew me before I was born, that He spoke life into me before anything else. And now I go by that word every day of my life. I know next in my life is to offer that same experience to others. I want to serve. I remember when reading through the Gospels, Jesus told the disciples, whoever is last will be first and whoever is first will be last. And I want to be able to humble myself and serve others to give them that same experience. Like, who am I to hold this just to myself? I want to be able to give people a chance to experience the same thing I did, so God can rebuild them in their broken ways and rebuild them in His image. And people will find out that they are who they say they are in Him, that they don't need that validation from others, that they don't need to find a strange sense of peace from others, because that peace is within us. So for me, the next thing on my list 100% is to serve this community.
Life before Christ was very, I was 12 years old when I found Christ, and before that I was depressed. I felt a lot of rejection. I felt lonely, and I was just in a very dark place, even though, you know, you could say I was really young, but through my life I went through a lot, and I was just in a very dark place, and I didn't feel like I was loved. I didn't feel like I was accepted. I was very quiet. I was really by myself the whole time. Like, I didn't have friends. I just felt like nobody understood what I was going through at the time. So it was very hard for me, those moments in my life. My experience was very unique because I grew up Catholic, but I really didn't go to church much. We would go on like Christmas or, you know, special occasions. So I was 12 years old, and my grandma, she took us to the park, and then she said we're going to church. So, you know, I'm thinking, okay, we're going to church. And as we went to the church, and I saw everyone lifting their hands, and it was just so different to me. I found it kind of strange that people were lifting their hands and, you know, praying and worshiping. And, you know, throughout the whole service I was there, and they made a calling to accept Jesus, and I just felt this tug in my heart, like something was happening in me when they were talking about Jesus and this person that, you know, He saved us and He died on the cross for us, and that He can heal us, and that if we feel pain or we feel alone, that He's with us. And I just felt such a call, like a tug in my heart, and I found myself going to the front, and I accepted Him, and they prayed over me, and she just started to say things about my life that nobody knew. And I was freaking out because, you know, these are intimate things. These are things in your life that nobody knows, and these are thoughts. And she was telling me these things, that God was calling me, and that God knew the pain that I went through, and that He loved me, and that He chose me, and that I'm accepted, and that I am loved. And those are words that I always wanted to hear, and I was able to hear it that day. And ever since that, it's been such a walk with Him, and just knowing that I'm loved and that I'm accepted. And, you know, I found joy, and I found strength, and I'm happy. After receiving Christ, my life dramatically changed. Like I said, I found peace, I found hope, I found joy, and most importantly, I found love that I was needing in my life. I was able to find myself in God, and knowing who I was, knowing my identity. At first I didn't know who I was. I didn't know that Jesus did all these things for me. And now I live in freedom, and I walk with purpose, because that's what God has given us. He has given us purpose, and I walk with purpose. I know that God has a purpose for me, and moving forward after receiving Christ and knowing what He's done in my life, I want to be able to speak to other people, especially women, who have gone through abuse or have gone through rejection, and be able to speak life into them, or able to speak to girls who feel like they're not confident enough, or they don't have their self-esteem is low, and they feel like they have to look a certain way, or they have to say things to fit in. Be able to speak to them and tell them that they're loved, and that, you know, they're different for a reason, because God created them. God created all of us uniquely, and He created us to be a light in this world. And I want to be that light in the world, be a light to people who need God, and feel what I was feeling at such a young age, be able to show them that God truly loves them, and that Jesus died on the cross for them to not feel that way anymore. And that's what I feel that I'm called to do, is just to bring God's love to the world.